And welcome everyone to an exciting adventure on Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and tonight's guest I have been talking with, I will say in full honesty, backstage, and we've been having a lot of fun conversation. So you all are in for a huge treat with tonight's guest. I am so blessed that he agreed to come on and be our guest tonight, and so I am going to stop apparently getting tongue tied and twisted in my thoughts, and I'm going to turn it over to my amazing guest to introduce himself because he has done so much. I just couldn't surmise it in a fitting way, so I'm going to leave it up to him. So I turn it over to the one, the only, inspiring, informational Rob Shelsky.
Hi, everyone, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Michael, for having me on your show. I think it'll be an interesting evening. We can talk about a lot of different things, extraterrestrials or whatever. A little of my background: I am an author, a writer. I've written 82 books. I have been invited to the Library of Congress to give a speech on UFOs by invitation. Scared the heck out of me. 10,000 people in the theater, and I had stage fright. But I've also been an on camera expert for the Travel Channel for a show on UFOs. They flew me out to Hollywood for that. Not much came of it, but I got a nice weekend in downtown LA along with all the homeless people. So it was a good time. I enjoyed it. And I have been a member of MUFON and a field investigator for them for 3 years. I no longer am, but I'm still writing the books. And that's about sums up my life.
Well, thank you for that. And I know I said I would ask this of you backstage. And since you brought up writing 82 books, I just finished writing the first of four, and I'm getting four out. And it took me 2 years. And so I'm thinking, how in the world did you get 82 books written?
I faked them. Plagiarism is your friend. No, I get interested in subjects, and I've always been interested in UFOs, and so I just started researching them and learning more about them. And eventually, I learned enough where I thought, well, I ought to share this, write something about it to just get my thoughts on paper. And lo and behold, they kind of sold. So I just got into the habit of writing after I researched a certain amount. Um, do I have all the answers on this stuff? Gosh, no. I wish I did. I wish I had the answers to anything, frankly, including whether or not we're going to have a recession in 2 months. But some answers just don't come easily. So there you go. But yeah, we live in a strange world. There's a lot of strange things going on, and one of them definitely is UFOs or UAPs, if you prefer. I like UFOs. I have no reason to want to change the title. I don't know why the federal government keeps changing it. I think it's a form of distraction. I don't buy it. I mean, why would you want to say UAP instead of UFO? What's the difference, really? So they're
It
both an
sounds cooler, I think.
yeah. You think it sounds what cooler?
Well, when you say UAP is unidentified aerial phenomena, which is like ooh where a UFO is unidentified flying object. It's like
Yeah, I think that's cooler.
I
Unidentified
agree
flying
with you.
object.
I like the UFO and I stick with UFO, but I think that's where the government was like, let's use UAP because it sounds more hip to the new generation.
I think they just didn't want the stigma of the term UFO or flying saucer. So when they had to admit that they had a program going on about it, they just decided they weren't going to call it UFOs. They were going to call it UAPs. The government loves buzzwords. I remember back under the Reagan administration when they came out with the new MERV missile that had multiple nuclear heads on one missile. He called it the Peacekeeper missile because that was more friendly than calling it a doomsday weapon. So there you go. But either way, it's real, and I think UFOs are real. I think they're real. I think they're here. I think they've been here a long time, and I think they're definitely an unknown. And I am afraid that my opinion of them personally is that they're not our space brothers. They're not our friends, and the evidence for that seems to be overwhelming to me. How about you? What do you think of them? Do you think they are space brothers?
I think some of them, and it's a small amount right now, I think are out there and actually helping us in a way that benefits them. And there are those that want to enslave us and keep us enslaved.
I don't know if they want us enslaved or what they want, but the information that I've been gathering over the years, I've written about, I don't know, 5 books, 6 books on UFOs. Uh, Deadly UFOs have disappeared, for the moon is hollow, aliens rule the sky, all that stuff. But what I've come up with is that I can cite hundreds, literally, of cases, perhaps thousands of cases where UFOs have harmed individuals, have damaged property, have injured people, made them sick, and the number of people who have died in UFO encounters is far higher than most people think. They think it was just a couple. Uh-uh, a lot more. Probably a couple hundred is more like it, all told. People are injured or killed or both. And on top of that, I don't find that UFOs have done anything else other than harass our airlines, our military, our bases, military bases usually. They endanger commercial aircraft full of people. They have damaged private property. They have caused radiation burns. Uh, they seem to move with an impunity that bothers me terribly. And yet, the flip side, people say, well, they're our space brother friends. And I'm using the term space brother rather glibly. I don't mean to offend people by using that term. I'm not quite sure what else to call them. They call them that. But have you ever heard of a UFO shining a laser light into the woods to let Hansel and Gretel find their way out, to follow that light out? No. Have you heard about abductions? Yes. Cattle mutilations? Yes. Damage to people's property? Yes. Injuries to people? Yes. Disappearing planes? Yes. Abductions? Absolutely. Cattle mutilations? Yeah. And against all that, we're supposed to think there are space brothers? I don't buy it. I wish I could. I started off believing that, oh, I would love to meet an alien. I think it would be great to meet a superior person from an advanced civilization. But whoever these creatures are, they don't seem to have any morals. They're either immoral or they're amoral. They abduct us, they treat us horribly while we're abducted, and then they erase our memory. I'm sorry, but just because the memory of a traumatic experience is erased from you, it doesn't mean the repercussions from that experiment, whatever they did to you, are also erased. People develop phobias and all sorts of problems and health reasons after being abducted. And over a million Americans think they have been abducted. Can you imagine over a million people? Either that's a mainstream psychosis or they really have been abducted, at least some of them.
And what's interesting too is, you have instances where people say they went up in the craft and then they just, they don't remember anything come back, but then all of a suddenly they're like afraid of things that they normally weren't afraid of. And, you raise a good point. Is that the mind's view of processing what they experienced has manifested in this new way so that it's like protecting you from another occurrence or experiencing that kind of feeling again.
Well, I knew an astronomer in upstate New York. His name was David Brown. I can say his name because he's passed now. But he claimed to have been abducted as a child and abducted repeatedly over the years, 6 or 7 times, up to about the age of 28, and then it stopped. And I had a heck of a time getting him to talk about it. He had mentioned that he felt he had been abducted when we first met, and I wanted to interview him. He just couldn't do it. I do know that he was highly neurotic, smoked a great deal, and drank too much, and he never used to before all this took place, apparently. But he finally did a video and sent it to me. And in that video, and even in the video, he had a horrible time getting around to the subject. Drove me nuts waiting for it to happen. But yeah, he claims in abductions, and he can't remember a lot about them. But he does remember that it wasn't the Greys that abducted him. It was the blue ones, the short, squat blue ones, bluish ones, and they had a smell like wet cardboard, he said. And they would come in his room and take him when he was in bed. And I said, well, you sound almost regretful that the abduction started. I said, you sound almost like a jilted bride, David. And he said, "Yeah, Rob, that's kind of how I feel. I was special. They singled me out. They needed me. They wanted me for some reason, and then all of a sudden it stopped. It's like they just dropped me off in a car on the side of the highway and drove off and left me there." I said, "So you kind of wish it would keep on going?" He says, "Yeah, part of me does, because it made him feel special." So I, it sounds to me a little bit like Stockholm syndrome, like he began to become enamored of the people who were kidnapping him, and that's what they were doing, kidnapping. That's against human rights. Performing experiments on people, whether anal probes or otherwise, that is a violation of human rights. And just because you wiped someone's memory doesn't mean you wiped out the crimes you committed. And so that's why I think they're either immoral or amoral. They simply have no concept of morality as we know it. And have they been around here a long time? Yeah, we have evidence they date back probably to the caveman days, and certainly to the time of Alexander the Great and beyond. Whatever these things are, whoever they are, wherever they're here, they've been here a long time. They may actually be another race resident on Earth that we're not aware of. Uh, we talk about shadow people all the time, glimpsing something out of the corner of your eyes and turning and nobody's there. It may just be that they've developed a pretty good technology and they have cloaking devices. They might be moving among us, but unlike reptilian aliens, they're not disguising themselves, they're simply hiding themselves. And they seem to be able to pass through solid objects, so do their UFOs. They don't seem to be governed by our set of physics, so either they've developed some new physics or they're from a parallel dimension. Because whatever they're doing, we don't know how the heck they can do it. It seems to defy all the laws of physics as we know them.
That's true. And I wonder, because a lot of times, being, in the paranormal field, you walk into a building and you feel like something's there. You can't see it, but you can feel it's there. It's like you can sense, it's like all your senses except sight are like, there is something else in this room, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't put my finger on where they're at just yet. And I've always thought of it as, a spirit or could be an ET. And, you're bringing up, shadow beings being able to cloak. And I'm like, could that be what we're experiencing when we had that feeling? Is a cloaked being that was like, oh, I didn't know anybody was coming here tonight. I better hide and figure out what they're doing here.
They're doing a pretty good job of hiding. No, they seem to exist. I don't think there's a person on this planet who hasn't seen a shadow person, a glimpse of something out of the corner of their eyes that they thought was a person or an animal moving through the room, and they turn and look and there's nothing there. We've all done it. There's videos galore on the YouTube, and of course, some of them are hoaxed, but there's some quite realistic ones on there. And if you take the time to watch them, like on Slapped Ham or any of these popular paranormal shows, you'll see a lot of garbage, but you'll also see some really interesting stuff. And there was one case where a Mexican family was sitting on the veranda. I think it was in Mexico that it took place, and they're on a dirt road. And someone is filming them across the street, and they're all partying, having a good time, slapping and talking, all lined up in a row on the veranda. A car goes racing by, raising a slight cloud of dust, not much, just a little mist. And right behind it, something blurry that almost looks like it might have been a motorcycle or something like it zooms by. Now, you as the viewer watch it through the camera, but the people on the deck didn't seem to notice it except for one man. He looked up in shock, got up, left the veranda, walked down into the middle of the road, and looked down the road after where the car and the whatever the thing was had disappeared. He saw it, but we both saw it as a blur. That's all. And we're seeing a lot of this sort of thing lately now. And if they can make their UFOs cloak them, and we have a lot of evidence to suppose that they're doing that. In fact, we're starting to cloak our own vessels now too. We call it stealth, but it's the same thing. And only theirs is better. And so, yeah, I think they've been here a long time, and I think they are moving around among us. I really do. Not maybe like the reptilians. I don't have any proof of that, although some interesting suppositions. But I really do think that they have certain capabilities we don't have. Obviously, because they're UFOs, if they're the ones controlling them, have those capabilities.
Right. And going along those lines, I don't know if you've been keeping up with like Skinwalker Ranch, where they seem to have a dome or a bubble around a particular area of the land. What are your thoughts about what they're discovering there?
Uh, there's a lot of intriguing stuff with regard to the Skinwalker Ranch. I think there's also a lot of garbage. Uh, uh, Bigelow got control of MUFON, the billionaire, and he bought that ranch at some point. And then things started going a little strange, and people started making claims that they could summon the UFOs, telepathically. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm just saying I need to see it to believe it myself, and I haven't seen it, so I don't know. I'd rather there weren't skinwalkers, but there seems to be some evidence for that too. And a lot of other cryptids as well, including Mothman and Bigfoot. Did you know there's even a vegetable man now, or a celery man? He's got a head like a stalk of celery.
No, I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah, I'd like to invite him for dinner for salad.
That, or if he's salary, bring some peanut butter.
Or cream cheese. But uh, that was pretty good. But yeah, there's a lot out there we don't know. And I used to investigate this for a magazine called Alien Skin. I investigated the Brown Mountain Lions in North Carolina. They're real. What they are, I have no idea, but they're absolutely real. I've taken photos of them. Thousands of other people have. There's an actual turnout on a highway here in North Carolina with a big state sign that says viewing point for Brown Mountain Life. You pull off there and you get a wonderful view of the Brown Mountain Ridge Range across the way. Are they swamp cats? No. They're on the top of a mountain. No swamps on the top of a mountain. Are they hot air balloons? No. These things went straight up, and it was really windy that day. It was late autumn, no leaves on the trees. That's why that time to get a better view. And these things went straight up from the valley below, straight up, and went right into the sky. They turned red, and they never once wavered or drifted. So they're not balloons. At the time, there weren't really any drones to speak of at all. Not a helicopter, not an airplane. I can tell you what they're not, but I can't tell you what they were. But they're real. And by the way, they date back to pre-colonial times. The Native Americans used to just talk about them. They said that the lights were the lamps of Indian maidens searching for their lost husband, braves who were in a battle. And then an American Geological Survey in the late 1700s went through there, and they mentioned them. And we're not sure what the cause was, but thought it might have been piezoelectric, something to do with the quartzite in the mountains there, but no proof to back it up. Same with the Marfa lights in Texas, which I'm sure you've heard of.
I have, and I always find it interesting because the thing about the Marfa lights is you can go there and you can see them for a few moments, or you can go there for like a week and never see them. And so it's like that, I think, is what, in my mind, makes those more legit as being a unidentified flying object phenomenon versus a natural occurrence, because in nature things start to repeat patterns, like it could be every 3 weeks, then
Same with the
it'll be
Brown Mountain Lights.
appearance.
Yeah, you're not guaranteed to see them every night, but you do
Right.
see them quite often and for long periods. I watch them for over 2 hours. And and then of course there's the Devil's Tramping Ground, which I went and investigated. It's also real. Can't account for that. And oddly enough, it's right near a place that probably you might know. Do you ever watch the Andy Griffith Show, or did you when it was on,
I
or on
did.
repeats? Remember Siler City? I
I
used to
do.
live at Mount Pilot in Siler City. It's right by Siler City, about 5 miles south of it, which is not a city at all, but just a town. I don't know why they call it a city, but it isn't a city. But yeah, it's there. It's in the woods, 50 foot wide, round circle, completely barren of any woods, trees, weeds, anything that tries to grow near it gets stunted and gets shorter and shorter, and finally it's just dead. And they say that if you put anything in the circle, the next morning it'll be outside the circle. I don't know. I never spent the night there. It's a little too creepy.
Yeah, I'd be too afraid of like rolling in your sleep and accidentally rolling in it and aging or de-aging and being like, oh man, it'd be the worst is de-aging, because then you're like, oh man, I got to live through these years again and go back to school.
Yeah, but if you could remember what you have, what if you could know what you know now, it'd be great. But if you had to just put it all over again and not know what you know now, I wouldn't want to live through it again. But I mean, if you had your current knowledge, you could steer clear of the worst mistakes you made, right?
I don't know that that would work, because knowing what we know now, think about back in like the 70s, 80s, we would be probably more threatened to be locked up than we were as a kid
Well,
already.
you don't broadcast it around to everyone. By the way, I'm going to switch subjects here real fast. But you mentioned that you write. What kind of books do you write? Fiction or nonfiction?
So I wrote a book about my personal journey through life, and I broke it into four pieces: my paranormal journey into the paranormal field, my journey growing up through the metaphysical field, and my journey just for life, things that like travels that I've done or other things. And then I did a book about topics that I like to research and that catch my interest, and kind of my way of looking why I look at esoteric history, like things that were taught and then stopped being taught, and
Can you give me
places
an
that
example?
existed and disappeared. Like, so I've seen maps where Antarctica had green and then turned to ice. And so I was like, that's kind of interesting. Where's Atlantis? We have thoughts of Atlantis. Where is that? Lemuria, or another one is
You,
Mu.
yeah, you. I think that was supposed to be the parent civilization of Lemuria, or the other way around, one of the two. And the map you're talking about is probably the Piri Reis map, which is by a
It
British
is.
admiral. Yeah, and that does show shorelines, mountain ranges, and even rivers in Antarctica, which you can only see with ground penetrating radar because it's got 3 miles of ice on top of everything. So how did they know that? We know darn well the 16th century Antarctica was not clear of ice. So where did, and of course, his map was based on older maps, it was a compilation of them. So he got his hands on some map somewhere of some civilization that had already circumnavigated the globe and then gone down to Antarctica, and maybe quite some time ago, like about 7,000 years ago or more.
Right. And also the fact of, if you look, on Phoenician coins, the back of some of the coins have a river that can't be placed in Phoenicia, but if you take it over to the Mississippi, it lines up perfectly. And so I like to talk to, on the show about, where are the Phoenicians here sailing the Mississippi, in which case America's history doesn't start with the indigenous crossing the land bridge,
Yeah,
and
true.
doesn't start with the Vikings coming over and the all that we were here long before, but then we left, and that's why our history goes dormant. And
Why did we leave?
well, I had a guest on. His name is George Mitrovic, and he was showing that a large copper, vein was found in the top of the Mississippi area near like Illinois, and they have found copper, there where they had these tools, and they all said, "Oh, these must have been left by the miners in the 1800s." And he says, "No, actually, if you look, if you take the Phoenician coin as it is, that is the largest deposit of copper." And so, if in BC, in the age where copper was the main
Metal.
source of tools, the
Yep.
coins, and everything, they had to mine a lot of it. So where would they mine it? They mined it in America. And when you shifted from copper to bronze, You don't need it
Yeah,
anymore.
but
So
there was copper and tin mines, which is great for bronze, in Cornwall, England, and they were mined by Romans 2,000 plus years ago. So the idea that and even supposedly Jesus Christ traveled with his uncle Joseph of Arimathea, who was a merchant, and apparently he supposedly went to England, and that's where the English national hymn comes from, about Jesus walking the green fields of England. And so the mining has been around a long time. However, you're right about these mines. There's a mine in Utah they found that's a coal mine, and it was so old you couldn't light the coal. It had completely oxidized, and it went underground. It went almost 5 miles underground, and it's very smooth. And they think, excuse me, that it must be about 50,000 years old, which predates any civilizations we know of, any of them. Babylonians, um, Romans, Greeks, you name it. None of them were around for at that time. In fact, there was no civilization supposedly. So, but there was also the mound culture of the. We think they might be Native American or Amerindian derivation along the Mississippi River. They had quite a civilization. And I think the mounds were where they lived because of the flooding of the Mississippi River on a regular basis. They learned real fast to build these mounds and live on these big, huge mounds. And there's also the Serpent Hill up in Ohio, which is an above ground state park, I think. And they've got this huge mounded serpent curved on the ground. And they have a lookout tower you can climb to look at it from above. And then no one has any idea who built that or why. So there's a lot we don't know about our history, a heck of a lot. And I'm wondering if we ever will. I think maybe we will eventually. We're getting the tools now to kind of research it where we couldn't before.
and I feel like it's kind of like parallel to Egypt when it comes to our history and what we get told and what we don't. Is I look at Egypt and their cultural attache when it was Zawi Hawass. Everything was Egypt is first. Nobody predated Egypt. We were the master builders. We were this and that. And
Well,
I
they're
was
very
like,
proud. Yeah, they're very
what
proud.
about all of this? He's like, nope, we are this. That is contrary to us, so that doesn't exist. And I was like, yeah. And then you come over here and it's like, anything that we say, oh, this predates this. I had the kind of viewpoint of like reading articles where the Smithsonian comes in and they do their research and then they leave, but they happen to take it with them. And then you never hear about it again. And it's
True.
like, so it's like I feel like we both had the same kind of system where we have agencies or agents that are this defies our history, this defies what we want people to think, so we have to hide it away or get rid of it. So that's what we do, and it's like,
Well, academia is very controlled. And I have a real respect for Egyptian culture. If you look at my walls behind me, that's all Egyptian art on the wall, if you look carefully. And I have a registered Irish linen print up on this wall right over here. You can only see part of him. It's half of King Tut, you're saying. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of Egyptian art and culture. It does go back a long ways. The New Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the Old Kingdom, they go back a long ways. But there were other civilizations before them. Göbekli Tepe dates back 12,000 years. The Babylonians, who had supposedly had the first city, date back 6,000 years approximately. And we only supposedly stopped being hunter gatherers around 6,000, 7,000 years at the most ago. So we can't account for Göbekli Tepe. And I have a horrible time saying that name. It's like a tongue twister. How that could have been 12,000 years ago and be so elaborate, so large, and so much of it. It seems to, how did hunter gatherers who were constantly on the move, picking roots and vegetables and hunting the odd deer, stop long enough to build this incredible complex in Turkey? I mean, it took time, and then to deliberately bury it as if to protect it. What were they protecting it from? So And that dates back to the Younger Dryas period, about 12,000 years ago.
And what's interesting is here in Texas, there's a city and actually a county too by the name Rockwall. And their history of it is the city was here and they were farmers or somebody was plowing their field and they found this wall,
So you're not saying Rockwell, you're saying Rockwall
rock
as
wall.
as wall. Yeah, yeah. I've been reading about that. They're not quite sure if that's natural or not. I've
Yeah.
seen it. It looks fake, or not fake. It looks artificial to me. It doesn't look natural, but it could be theoretically.
Well, what was interesting is my parents went out there, and I don't know if I might be confusing an article I read with their experience, but when they were when they were telling me about it, is they had exposed a part of the wall, and then there was like a ceiling level, and then there was more underneath that they were hoping to excavate. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, a stack of stone around that could be natural. It could have fallen and just piled up. I'll give you that. But a ceiling going across with timber and stone, that doesn't naturally just settle and happen. That has to be planned, laid out.
Yeah, you're right. It can't be natural. Yeah, at least I
And,
hope it's not natural. But
right. And
did you know we have a stone wall, quite a long one, up here in the Appalachian Mountains here in North Carolina? We don't know who built it or why. They think the Vikings might have built it, like a Viking group of people got stranded here and didn't go back. But have you heard of the Moon-Eyed people?
not that I can think of at this point.
They're a tale. The Cherokee American Indian talk about the Moon-Eyed people, and they had several battles with them, and they ultimately won. But these people apparently could not take bright sunlight, and so could only come out of their caves at night, and that's why they were called the Moon-Eyed people. But we've had some very strange occurrences in the Appalachian Mountains here, including some, total maybe 17, 18 vanished settlements, everything from logging camps to mining camps to small towns that just utterly vanished. The people just disappeared overnight and were never seen again anywhere else. And that's the last book I just wrote about was the mysterious Appalachian Mountains because it does intrigue me. What happened to these people? And it's reasonably close by. I can go up and I can, explore a little. Although they say explore at your own risk. So again, there's an awful lot that's strange in the world that we don't understand. Um,
Right. Like the Anasazi. I mean, they were cliff dwellers in the Southwest, and the Pueblos are like, we are not descendants of the Anasazi. We are not Anasazi.
no, they supposedly disappeared completely, and they also supposedly
Right.
were cannibals. And your average Native American does not like the idea that any American Indians were cannibals, but the gnawing on the bones and all that sort of thing, of the human bones, suggests strongly in some of their campfire pits and stuff that they were quite capable of inviting people to dinner, so to speak, and then never going home. But
And what's interesting is like the Pueblos will say, we knew of them, but they don't go into their dwellings. They didn't take over their dwellings and say, hey, here's houses we could live in.
well,
They stayed away from it. And like you're saying, the fact that there are no bones, there are no like telltale signs of what happened, that's what's the most intriguing. Is it's like they were there one day, gone the next.
they theorized that it might have been a prolonged drought that also affected the Mayans at about that time. uh, in Central America and the world in general, apparently, but they don't know for sure about that. Uh, I know that here, the Indians. I hope they don't mind the expression. I have some Amerindian friends, and some of them prefer to be called Indians. They're hereditary. That's what they want to be called. Others prefer Native American. I'll call them whatever they like to be called because, after all, it's who they are, and I don't mind calling them whatever they would prefer to be called, but I'm not sure what to call them right now. So I'm just going to say uh, Native Americans mostly, and hope that I don't offend any of them out there. But they have a tradition of sacred places. We don't, and the pueblos were a sacred place to the Indians of today. They would not go into them. However, we always think of a sacred place as someplace holy and to be protected and to be respectful of. The Native Americans, especially the Cherokee, didn't really pin it down quite that hard. The sacred place was a no-go place. You didn't go there. It was sacred for whatever reason. Sacred because something existed there, something evil was there, something good was there, or something powerful was there, and you didn't want to bother them. And we have a lot of those here on the East Coast. They date back quite a ways. And the Appalachian Mountains are full of those as well. And a lot of these towns and settlements that disappeared were in exactly those places where the Native Americans said that was sacred and you should not go. They won't even hunt or fish within 5 miles of some of these places, oddly enough. And yet the game is pretty good. So I'm not sure uh, what that means, except that there might be a very, very old, and for want of a better term, evil that exists in the Appalachians. They're very old mountains. They date back over 1 billion years. They're the oldest mountains in America, I believe, at least in the United States. And they have their mysteries. And the, when you go up there, you get that feeling. And by the way, you were saying that you went into a room and you felt a presence. Did you know that the feeling of being watched is an actual feeling and it's reliable? They've done studies on it. And people can feel being watched, and about 87% of the time, they were right. So even though you can't possibly know someone's watching you, you can have a feeling you're being watched. They think it might be some sort of survival instinct we've developed. But that means that when you feel a presence, you might not be, excuse me, feeling the presence so much as sensing someone else in the room that you're being watched. And with shadow people, that could very well be where that feeling comes from. Although I have to admit, do you ever feel afraid when you glimpse a shadow person or go into one of these places that presence is there?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned shadow people because when I was preteen to teenager, I would see out of the corner of my eye shadow beings, is what I call them, because they were like black humanoid figures, but you'd only see what was peering around like a door frame
Exactly.
or
Mhm.
around a wall
And then when you go to
opening.
look, there's nothing there.
Right. And
And you
so
think
I
what's
would
that
play
going
a
on?
game with them of I would be watching TV and I'd see out of the corner of my eye them getting closer and closer. When they got to a certain point, I'd turn and look and be like, "Got you." And I viewed it as like a game of, who's gonna see who first, and would I allow them to touch? No, but how close would I get? How close could I let them get without them touching me? And it was like, to me, it became like this game playing with spirits. And I thought, oh, this is fun. This is great. And then I
I'm
had a guy come on and goes, shadow beings are these dark beings, and you shouldn't, if you see them, there could be trouble. And I was like, I grew up playing with them.
yeah, I'm not sure if they're dangerous or not. They don't seem to be, but they seem very invasive. I mean, they could be in the room right now and you wouldn't know it because they're cloaked.
Right.
They're shadow people. And are they watching us all the time? Do we have any privacy? Are they in the bathroom when we're in the bathroom? Are they in our bedrooms? I mean, they seem to be anywhere they want to be, whenever they want to be. And they seem to be pretty much everywhere. And then on top of that, you have all the cryptids, like you have the Mothman. Although in England and Cornwall, he's referred to as the Owl Man, but he's a worldwide phenomenon too. Now, if it was just a local place in the United States, you could discount it much more easily. But when this is worldwide and everywhere, then you have to kind of consider that there might just be something to it.
Yeah, and that's true. And I don't know if you've ever been into the Washington, Columbia River Gorge area,
Yes, I have.
but I had a guest, James Zubecki, and he was telling me about his experience there, and that in the 1940s, the U.S. Department of Energy put an article out in a local paper that said, we genetically modify these alligators, and some of them have escaped. Do not approach. If you see, notify us, because they have been enhanced to be able to walk on 2 feet, maybe, or something. They had modified them to where they would be cryptid, classified as a cryptid over a gator. And the government said, yeah, we developed these because we needed to protect a facility for our nuclear program,
With
and
alligators?
dolphins can't operate in this water, so we had to find something. So we had a scientist genetically modify, and I was like, "Oh my god, they admitted it!" And he goes, "Yeah, they admitted it one time," and I was like, "No way."
But alligators could live through a winter up there. I mean, if they were loose, they'd never survive a winter up in the BC Washington State area. Far too cold, far too wet.
Well, it
Well,
depends on
not
what
too wet,
they modified them with, because they could have
but they
developed.
modify them with fur coats.
I mean, when you're modifying them, like crossing them with other species, I mean, trying to create a guard that can guard something, I'm like, you could have crossed the gator with, say, a thick fur, like a bear almost, and then, like, yeah, they have a thick skin so they can adhere to the
Yeah,
cold.
I suppose you could. Of course, one's an amphibian, and the other is a mammal. So that would take some doing, but they're getting pretty good at all that sort of. How long ago did this supposedly take place? Any idea?
They
Approximately.
said the article took place in the 40s during World War II.
Ah, well, they had very, very limited capabilities. They weren't genetically modifying things so much as they probably were breeding, breeding them for certain characteristic traits. We didn't even know DNA existed in the 1940s, and so I mean that all came later. We did have a concept of genetics, um, thanks to Mendel, I think it was, and his sweet peas. The pink sweet peas, the white sweet peas, and the red sweet peas. You mix the red with the white, and you'll get, and out of four, you'll get one pink, one white, and I mean, one red, one white, and two pink. So that was about the extent of our genetics capability in the 1940s. So I don't think they're crossing it with mammals or something, although they could have crossed it with other reptiles, I suppose.
Well, what they said was the scientist that was tapped was he had figured out how to take these small, I think it was like salmon or something, and food source was getting kind of scarce because of all the hunters, the fishermen, and everybody throughout the years just eating without letting the population repopulate.
Hmm.
And so he had looked at it and was like, and developed a fish that was bigger, meatier, and could grow faster. And
Oh yeah, you can breed for stuff like that all the time. Look at all the dogs and cat breeds we have, and that's not
right.
genetic. That's just at least not genetic engineering. That's just breeding.
Well, they say that when he figured out how to do that with the fish, is the government tapped him on the shoulder and said, "You're now going to become a part of this project, and you're going to help us develop these things." And he disappeared from history
Hmm.
once he entered that area. So I don't know exactly what happened there. I just know, like, from the articles, and there's a lot of cryptids in the River Gorge area, and so it's like I can't help wondering, are the cryptids there now from the government facility that escaped and are now running wild, and you know we think things would stay limited to there, but who says, if it's like, Mothman, if it's got wings, how's it
It
going to
can
stay there?
fly.
It'll fly anywhere.
And look at Jurassic World. No matter what they do, they can't keep those darn reptiles on the island, can they?
I know.
I mean, they're
And
everywhere. People. That show really, I don't know how people keep watching it. It's gotten so stupid. Walking your pet dinosaur. I mean, you know.
Well,
Although,
and
mind you, I don't mind that.
I was gonna say I took the notion of Jurassic Park would be really cool, but develop the herbivores. That would be amazing enough to see and walk upon. Why would we create the meat eaters that are gonna hunt and kill us?
I agree. I agree. I mean, that was kind of stupid, but of course, it's the meat eaters. Excuse me. We go for. We want Tyrannosaurus Rex. We want the raptor. We want, we want the stuff that's scary and spooky. But
I can tell you, I have new respect though of the raptor from watching the movies when they talk about how it could open doors and communicate through sound, and I'm like, oh man, how intelligent they were, and I was like,
yeah,
I
but
have
they're not
new
really our.
respect.
Yeah, they're not. They really weren't that intelligent. They had primitive reptilian brains. The hypothalamus was about as high as their brain capacity went. The hippocampus area was developed, but the upper layers of the brain weren't well developed. They weren't a very bright species. Um, Although I'm not sure because I wasn't there when they were alive. But I mean, the evidence would seem to suggest otherwise. However, with cryptids, I think some of them are real. We're finding new. They just found a new species of squid or a jellyfish that had 70-foot long tentacles.
I saw a blurb about that, and I was like, was it a jelly? And my mind goes, is it jellyfish or is that akin to the kraken and the giant squid?
I was thinking it was a giant squid, but they said it was a kind of a jellyfish-like creature, or was it eating jellyfish? I can't remember. It was just really. I think I just saw it today. A brief blurb on it. It was either today or yesterday. It's hard to keep up with all this. Tell me, do you believe UFOs are real?
I believe they are, and
And where do you think
I,
they come from?
I think there are other worlds out there and galaxies out there, and I kind of poke fun a little bit, not in a mean way or a rude way, but when I hear like people going, I need to point a laser in the sky so a UFO can find me. I go, these people traverse time and space. I think they can find you if they wanted to find you, with or without the laser.
Well, yeah, but I have to admit, I kind of did that one time. I was up in Pine Bush, New York. They'd had it was like a superstorm of UFOs, a triangular-shaped craft, were all around Pine Bush, which is the Hudson River Valley area. And I had a very powerful spotlight. It was 1 million candle power, and we would blink it and flat. We were staying out. One of the favorite places to view was near an old Jewish cemetery, so we were parked outside the gates of that, and we were flashing this at the sky. We saw several satellites, but never saw a UFO there. However, we did get a lot of the locals driving by and hooting and honking their cars and shouting at us, thinking we were idiots, and maybe we were. I don't know, but you try anything to try to find answers, and it was harmless and it was fun. We had a good time sitting out
Yeah.
there looking at the stars.
Yeah, and I was watching a show, and it, is totally different, but it was about these bush pilots that fly doctors in Alaska because it's bush country. They don't have normal means of transport. And these guys were looking for treasure, and they had to use a laser pointer into the sky to see where, a certain line or something in this treasure map. It was part of it. And these kids shined it up, and the medical plane was flying by, and it hit the pilot in
Oh,
the eye, and he was like, I can't see. Somebody needs, the co-pilot. He's going to the co-pilot and says, you need to land the plane. I can't see. I just took a laser to the eye.
it's not
My eyes.
permanent though, is it? It just dazzled him, didn't it?
Well, for him, it turned out to be non-permanent. It came back after a few months, I think, or they were saying, or a month. It took time, but could you imagine though being the pilot and if you're a single pilot plane and a laser hits you,
Yeah, I didn't
so
use a
I was
laser.
like,
We just used a standard spotlight, so they can't
yeah,
hit me for that. But hey, that's highly illegal. I mean, you're threatening a lot of people's lives when you do stuff like that, you know? I wouldn't
I
do that
know, and it's like,
unless I could get away with it.
I know, and I keep hearing people like saying, "Yeah, we're shooting lasers into the sky and getting, UFOs to respond," and I'm like, "That's great, but how many pilots, are you
Are you? Yeah,
sure there's
definitely.
no pilots in the airspace while you're doing this? Because
Yeah, I don't think that's the best way to approach the whole thing,
no,
really. So if you think UFOs are real, and you do, where do you think they're from? And you think they're from outer space?
well, so
You were
some of
mentioning
them,
galaxies and planets and things.
yeah, I think some of them are from different stars out there that have planets or could be a star that sustains life and they have a craft that travels and it looks like light, which could make sense if they're a star, they don't have surface, so you can travel through light. So make your ship of light.
Photon,
But I
yeah.
also feel like because they're coming from underwater, I feel like, they might be terrestrial, but not in the sense of like living and operating like on soil. They're underwater operating in depths that we can't fathom. No pun intended.
Yeah, there was a pun there.
But I feel like, yeah, there are, caves, different places that are depths that we can't imagine that I'm like, I feel confident UFOs could totally be operating there and we'd have no idea and being observed and
And they
just
seem to come out of volcanoes and lakes and rivers and even mountains. And they've been when like Pinatubo erupted. I think it was in the Philippines. They spotted a UFO right near when it was erupting, and apparently it was a UFO because it wasn't moving. It wasn't a rock flying through. They were just sitting there, and then it darted off finally to the had a across the horizon. So it wasn't something being ejected from the volcano itself. We know that. We don't know what it was and why it was there, but it was there. So, but I don't know
yeah.
how we can go on denying it. I mean, the government has so consistently and persistently denied these things that you have to come to the conclusion that they're lying. You know the old saying, methinks thou protesteth too much. And the government constantly seems to be protesting this. Oh, no, there's no such thing if UFO. It's just flying saucer scare. Oh, well, there might be something, but it's probably swamp gas or the moon or Venus. People misinterpreting. Then finally, it's well, UFPs do exist, but they don't seem to be any danger to our airspace. Really? Then why do you have a government program to research them? I mean, if they're not a danger,
Yeah.
why worry about it? You know,
Project Blue Book. What are
that
some of
was
the
a
other ones?
whitewash. For a blue book, that was a real whitewash. I mean, it really was. That's my point. But yeah, no, I there was even a show on TV in the '60s called Project Blue Book. Did you ever watch it?
I hadn't heard of that one, but I did watch the one the History Channel put out like probably a decade ago.
Mm. Yeah, this predates that. It was again, it was a whitewash. Every time someone saw a UFO, it was like one woman was looking out of a plane and she's going, "Oh, I see a UFO! I see a UFO!" Then one of the two UFO experts from Project Blue Book looks out the window and he goes, "No, you're looking at Venus." So I mean, it was more of a to. And have you ever noticed, like with the news media, you'll get two anchor people that say, "Oh, one of our citizens here in Toledo saw an interesting thing the other day. They saw a flying saucer," and they look at each other and they smirk and a little chuckle.
Yeah.
Everything they do to try to discount the idea that these things exist, which makes me think that they do exist. There is a conspiracy of silence, and I think that conspiracy is for some very real reasons.
I agree. And to me, I liked the movie Contact and I like,
Good
the
movie.
story
Good
that it
movie.
unfolded.
Yep.
But I think, and if memory serves right, it's Matthew McConaughey's character. I think lands the most prevalent line that I think should wake everybody up, and that is, if we're the only life out there, then there's a lot of wasted space out there.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was like,
Yep.
to me, that was like the perfect line to sit there and say, y'all are nuts for
And yet,
saying,
when we seriously try to think there might be people out there, then we're called nuts. Every scientist will say, well, the universe is a very big place. The likelihood that we're the only living creatures in it is pretty slim. There must be more. And yet, when you try to pin them down, like, is this new comet entering the solar system? Is that possibly alien craft or something? Oh, no, no, that can't possibly be that. It can't. Even before the thing gets into the solar system, they're discounting certain things, except for that one Harvard scientist, Loeb, I think his name is. But I'm afraid Loeb's a little bit on the nutty side. I mean, he really is. It just why would you ruin your credentials by spouting some of this stuff? I mean, if it's true and you have evidence to support it, by all means. But if you're just basically blowing hot air and nothing at all to back it up, then why would you self-destruct like that? That seems because what happens if you do find real information? Then no one's going to believe you. It's like the boy who cried wolf.
right,
So, so don't. Now, if he's just hypothesizing, but when you hypothesize and all the newspapers are lapping it up and posting articles every week about this professor from Harvard, that tells me that it's attention getting rather than actual serious science at work here. And you have to be careful with our science culture. It exists on grants. If you want to do any research at all, you have got to get a grant. You have got to have the money. And scientists have been warned since the 40s and 50s. Do not submit anything to do with UFOs. You'll be laughed out of the office. You'll be laughed out of your university. You will lose all credibility, and your reputation will be ruined permanently. And it happens a lot. And so, in order to get these grants, they have to steer clear. UFOs are the third rail of scientific research. No one wants to touch them. No one dares go near it because it destroys you and your reputation as a scientist if you do. If you take any of it seriously, that's how seriously the government and the powers that be have been pushing to keep this under wraps by absolutely ridiculing and destroying people's careers and lives anytime they push it too far. I don't care if it's Bob Lazar, who actually did work at Livermore because an internal phone book showed his name in there, Bob Lazar, physicist. They actually had it on camera on the news channel in Las Vegas at the time, Channel 8. And I think it might have been George Norrie or his co host that was the interviewer. And so he existed and he said, they're going to erase me. And they did. They lost all his college paperwork. It no longer exists. He no longer has proof that he's a physicist. They made him a non person. And they were they didn't do it quickly, but they did it over the next few years, and it didn't take long before he was utterly discounted for a long time. Now he's had a resurgence where people are saying, some of the things you said seem pretty accurate. So now he's sort of coming back into the limelight again. But for a long time there, he was out in the hinterland somewhere, but he wasn't here, and that's a shame. He
it
dared
is.
to,
And
no.
we're actually at the top of the hour, so do you need to go or do you have time for a couple more questions?
No, I have time for a few more questions. I noticed
Okay.
you're getting people posting things. Is anyone posting any questions they'd like answered?
Not yet. But one question I have, and it's something we were talking about before we came live, and I think, kind of what you were talking about it, is an interesting story that we should bring up, and that is talking about the moon and how you describe it as being a hollow thing in space and not a celestial object.
Well, I think it is a celestial object.
Oh,
Uh,
it is. Okay.
yeah, I mean anything in space is a celestial object, right? Even a satellite. But it's I don't not sure if the moon is hollow or if it has very large lava tubes or caverns in it. But there's a lot of evidence. Again, no smoking gun, but a lot of evidence to support the idea. For instance, when they took soil samples in Apollo 11 and 12, they found out that the top three layers of soil on the moon are reversed. The densest stuff is on top, then the next densest, and the lightest stuff was the third layer down. We can't account for that. Take soil at random from your yard. Take a handful, put it in a glass of water, shake it up, let it settle, and always the denser material goes in the bottom. It'll form in layers, the lightest stuff at the top. That's just how nature works. It's called gravity. Now, on the moon, it's reversed. At least the top three layers are. That's one thing. Another thing is neptunium. There's an isotope of neptunium. I want to say 227 or 237, something. It's been a long time since I actually studied it, but it's on the moon in fairly good abundance. Now, it shouldn't be because it has a half-life of around 2 million years, approximately. So if you started off with some neptunium on Earth 4.5 billion years ago, by now all of it should have degraded into another form. And it hasn't. It's still on the moon, but there's none left on Earth. We could create it in a place like a cyclotron or something, but we can't. It doesn't exist in nature here. It's gone, but it's on the moon. Helium-3, which is a wonderful fuel for fusion reactors, is in abundance on the moon, not on the Earth. Which is strange because scientists have found blue glows on the moon near the Aristarchus crater. And this has been going on for a long time, a couple centuries. In fact, our Aristarchus crater glows blue so often it's referred to as the blue gem by scientists, not by me, by scientists, the blue gem. There have been beacons, flashes, tracks, mist, so-called volcanoes, and there aren't any volcanoes on the moon. It's been dead for a long time in that regard. And all sorts of what they call transient lunar phenomena. Now, this was a report commissioned by NASA itself. It extended over 500 years, about back to the time when the telescope was invented. They wanted fairly good observations. And these transient lunar phenomena have been seen ever since. Another thing with the moon is that it shouldn't have any mist. It has an atmosphere that's virtually a vacuum. There should be no mist on the moon. They've seen lightning on the moon. They don't know how there can be lightning. Lightning usually has to transfer through some kind of medium, like air and that sort of thing. We can't account for it. And also, the moon is a very strange place because the near side of the moon is covered with these big, flat, dark gray areas called maria, which literally is Latin for seas. The ancients thought they were seas they were looking at when they looked up at the moon. These mares are huge lava fields. They're on the side facing the Earth. There are no maria on the far side of the moon, only on the near side of the moon. The far side of the moon has a thicker crust than the near side. If someone were digging out the center, they'd be having to pour out this stuff somewhere, and you'd have these large lava flows. Plus, you might have soil in reverse, because when you're digging it out and dumping it, you're reversing the order of it. That would make the densest material on top and the lighter materials underneath. So it works well that way. So, and also, the isotope of the moon is the same as the Earth, and yet it's missing a lot of things. There is a lot of titanium we've seen on the moon in places, and we don't have a lot of titanium on the Earth. You have to really dig for it, and so there's just a lot of. And also, the moon has an almost perfectly circular orbit. The only planet with a more circular orbit is Venus, and Venus is a weird place too. It revolves the wrong way, uh, just the opposite of all the other planets in the solar system. And so something happened big there. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that makes us, and also the moon has it's the perfect distance from the Earth to create a perfect total eclipse. No other moon in our solar system can do that with its mother world. None. And there's over 500 moons in our solar system. Why are we the only ones that have it? And oddly enough, if the moon is hollow and it's circling the Earth, there's one other planet that might have a hollow moon. Can you guess which one it is?
I'm gonna guess
I'll give you a hint.
Saturn,
The planet might have had life on it at one time.
Mars.
Yes. Phobos is not dense enough. By the way, the moon's not dense enough. The moon's supposedly made from the mantle of the Earth, but its the density is so light compared to the Earth that the moon could almost, not quite, but almost float in water. Phobos is the same way. Its density is way too low for the size of the moon it is. We can't account for it, and they've conjectured it might be hollow. And oddly enough, it circles a planet that's the only other planet in our solar system that might have life that we know of, or had it once. So that's an odd coincidence. So, I mean, again, no smoking gun, but a lot of intriguing data.
Well, and another thing that we were talking about regarding the moon is we assume the moon has always been here, but there are stories from cultures to where they talk about a life where there was no moon in the sky, and then all of a suddenly there was a moon in the sky. And so, how can that be? You know, we
Well,
have an object that's big in the sky,
yeah.
although we'll talk about that in a second, the size of the moon, actually, as you pointed out. But how could we have stories of no moon and then all of a sudden moon if it is natural celestial object?
And that is odd. The Greeks referred to the proselynes, the people that lived in Greece before the later Greeks arrived, the ones with all the odd names like Aristarchus. Uh, my mind's blanking out on the Greek names right now, but they said that the proselynes were a race that inhabited Greece before the current Greeks moved into it, meaning current in about 500 BC. And they called them the proselynes, which literally means before the moon, before there was a moon. The Romans also talked about a time before there was a moon in their historical records. In the New World, in Central America and North and South America, and even in Mexico, the native tribes are often started their stories back in the ancient times before there was a moon. This is a common way to start a story that was basically a legend or a myth. That's what we call them. They don't call them that; they call them history. And so there's a lot of written records and historical vocal references that refer to a time when there was no moon. The moon may have been a natural object that was taken, hollowed out, or made more habitable, and then moved into that nice, perfect circular orbit around the Earth. So, are we being watched? We could be. And by the way, the moon is a wonderful place for the military. It's the high ground, and any military anywhere in the world at any time will tell you that it's important for the military to occupy the high ground. It's the most advantageous. They can watch us day and night, century after century from up there. And there was not a thing we could do about it up until very recently. And even now, we're pretty limited. So,
Yeah, I agree. And I just, I find it interesting how, science, is so called pulled the wool over our eyes because we grew up thinking, okay, this object split off from the Earth and was there and moved around, and this is science fact. And then you hear all these stories, and you're like, wait a minute, who do we trust? The people that were physically here that told us the stories? Or do
well,
you trust the science today? And it's like, it's a mix because everybody knows, like the game telephone. You tell one person, and by the time five or six people get it, you don't have the same story.
story is completely different. Yeah, quite weird usually, too. Well, science is based on the idea of the scientific method. You have to have provable results that can be repeated by other people. That's the maxim of science. And that's why I go with it because it's the only thing we have. Now, it has been growing. For instance, in the 20s, there was a gentleman who came up with the idea of continental drift. He was laughed out of geology, ruined his career. You never heard from him again. I honestly can't think of his name right now. He's in one of my books. I should remember it, but I don't. But then all of a sudden, around the 50s, we suddenly figured out that continental drift is real. And I remember seeing it in school in the early 60s, talking about continental drift. Whereas 10 years earlier, the man was laughed out of his career. This is very common. And science takes it too much on itself sometimes. Um, yes, use the scientific method. Yes, approach this in a pragmatic, logical way. But by the same token, don't rule out something simply because you don't know anything about it. If you don't, if most of these scientists have never studied American history or European history, and they don't know about these stories that the Central American people spoke, or the Greeks or the Romans spoke about a time when there was no moon. All they know is there's a moon in the sky. Although one scientist at NASA, McDonald, I think his name was, said it would be easier to prove the moon doesn't exist than to prove it exists. Because the moon does ring like a bell. That's another thing it does. And it can ring like that for several hours. How can it do that if it's solid? Rocks will ring
Right.
or vibrate for a very short period, but not for hours.
Yeah. I looked it up, and according to AI, because that's who Google gave me first, it's Alfred Wegener.
That's it. Alfred Wegener. Yeah. He's the one. Yeah. They utterly destroyed that poor man. And he was right. He was right. But at the time, continents floating around on the world like they were islands on a sea, not likely.
Well, and I think the part, where they say like Pangea, where we were one massive island that drifted apart, they looked at, it's like you look at the continents now and it's like if you were to just push them back together, they wouldn't fit. And so, like, no, there can't be a Pangea. But it's like if you tweak them a little bit, like turn one maybe on its side, it's like all of a suddenly they fit. And it's like,
Yeah.
hey, who's to
And you
say?
it's quite clear that South America fits into Africa almost perfectly, and that North America, if you tilt it slightly, it meshes with Europe very well, and Australia and India, the subcontinent. Oh, and it's not just been the one. It's not just been Pangea. We had Gondwana. We had another one called Rhodesia, something or other. But we've had a lot of supercontinents. I think five or six of them at least.
Well, and what I find interesting is, we talk about, life, and, we have bones of dinosaurs that are in Africa, that are in North America, and are in, Europe.
And South
And it's
America.
like, you can go, well, I can see how Africa could get into Europe. They're giant. They could have probably crossed the Suez Canal like no problem. But how do you go from Africa to America? And I'm like, they had to be connected
Well,
at some
and
point.
that's more proof because if you look at Australia, they have a beautiful flower, very large and big, called proteas. And the only other place in the world that has them, I believe, is in Africa, in South Africa. Now, Australia and South Africa are widely separated, but they both have the same plant that evolved, Protea. So they had to somehow have been together because Protea does not float on the ocean waters. It sinks like a stone. It just couldn't have made it to Australia over across the Indian Ocean. And this is true of other plants and animals too. But yeah, it's interesting how the Earth is evolving and we're learning more. But the thing is, people say, well, science taught me this and now this is true, so you can't trust science. Yes, you can. Science is a learning experience. Every year that goes by, we learn more. It took the entire history of the human race up to about 1957 to accumulate all the knowledge the human race had in 1957. It took all of history to get there. Then it only took 15 years to double that, and then it took half that time to double that, and then half the time to double that. We're rapidly reaching the technological singularity, where information is flowing so fast that we can't even predict what will happen in the next minute, let alone the next few days. Right now, we want to be able to predict economies, finances, even the weather. But with the technological singularity, the information pouring in, we're getting oh, gigabytes and gigabytes and petabytes of information from satellites and things orbiting other planets. It's entire encyclopedias of information are pouring in every few hours. How do we correlate this stuff? How do we index it? How do we search it so that we can find it when we need it? It's becoming a major problem.
Well, and, talking, going back for a second to the continental drift, we're told we're constantly in motion. We're not cast in stone, like, the continents are not, this is it. No, we're still moving. We're just
Mhm.
we're moving. I guess we're either moving with it so we don't feel it, or it's ever so slightly that we just write it off. But I look at like Alaska being so close to Russia, and if they collide, does that make the rest of North America will swing up into Asia, or how will those
Well,
merge? And it's
actually,
like,
another supercontinent, it will form, they think. They've already shown how it would come together again. But I'm not quite sure. And it does make you wonder if Russia and the United States ever were connected. Was there a land bridge between the two, or was it just an ice bridge? During the last
Yeah,
ice age, the
the
seas would
Bering
have been frozen.
Straits,
Yeah, the
or
Bering Strait.
not
Yeah,
Bering, yeah, the Bering
yeah, the
Land
Bering
Bridge.
Strait. Yeah, and that supposedly is where the Amerindians came across from Europe. But now we're finding out that they probably did, but also other peoples came before them. We have had Polynesians, we've had Romans. Apparently ships got lost at sea, and some of them ended up in America, South America. Not all of them ended up at the bottom of the ocean, I guess. Even on the Money Pit Island, they found a Roman coin, and that's up in Canada.
Yeah,
I
Oak
didn't, I didn't,
Island.
yeah, I didn't realize the term Money Pit actually came from that island, Oak Island. Did you?
I
You've
didn't
heard the,
know that's where it was coined from.
yeah, that's where it was coined.
Again,
Yeah.
no pun intended, but
No, but you're good at that.
I know you got to take them while you can get them.
Yeah. You ought to cash yourself in on those and make some money off of it. That wasn't that fun.
Uh,
But
but
collecting dollars to donuts will be wrong once in a while.
yeah,
More
and
fun. But yeah, I don't know. The continental drifting is pretty well set. Venus apparently doesn't have continental drift. We don't know why. It's the sister to Earth, almost exactly the same size. Horrible atmosphere, incredible atmospheric pressure. It's rotating the wrong way. Venus is a mess. And yet, even there might even be life there in the upper clouds, microbial life. They think they found evidence that there is microbial life in the upper clouds. Granted, it's not the smoking gun of an alien, but if there's microbial life on any other world, that tells us life can and will start in other places.
well, and look at Mars. I mean, we were told all throughout our lifetimes Mars was lifeless, and now they're like, oh no, there's water. So we found water on Mars, so life
And
is
on the moon,
possible.
and on the moon, we found water on the moon. Yeah, I know. It's funny because when I was young, they didn't know if Mars could support life or not yet. It just wasn't. They were still conjecturing that it could be. The first drawings of Mars by astronomers showed canals. Those were actually named for the Italian guy who named them, and he called them canali. So we right away thought canals on Mars. Well, actually, that term means lines or like straight lines. And when you look at the early diagrams of Mars, it shows this odd network of lines spreading out across the planet. And that's how we saw Mars. Now we don't see it that way anymore. Did
And
Mars change, or did we change, or did the Mandela effect have an effect?
those are all are possible. And
Hmm. Yeah.
what
So
I find interesting too is, we have like Edgar Burroughs who wrote a book about life on Mars.
Edgar Rice Burroughs, and he wrote more than
Yes.
one book. He wrote tons of books.
And, he postulated all of this, and everybody laughed and was like, no. And they couldn't even make a movie for 100 years to truly show what he was talking about because our technology was not there, is
No,
what
our,
they
C,
say.
our CGI wasn't good enough until quite recently, the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
I was
So,
watching Babylon 5. I love the Babylon 5 series, but the CGI in that compared to today was pretty awful.
well, I mean, look at Star Trek. I mean, as the series evolved,
So they
different
use models.
shows.
They actually use little, not so little. They use models of the Enterprise and stuff, actual models, and they'd hang them in a dark environment. So they were at, and did you know Star Trek was one of the last ones to switch over to CGI? They really wanted to stick with their models.
I did know that, and one of the things that has had me most curious about the original Star Trek series is all the shows they knew were popular. They would put props aside just, in case they bring it back, or, for selling down the road, they could make money because people would want to buy it. Well, when Star Trek ended, they threw it all away. And it's
I
like,
know.
why would you throw away a major TV show? I mean, it had top ratings for
Well,
most of it.
No, actually, yes and no. It had reasonably good ratings, not spectacular. It was a very expensive show to produce. It was about $500,000 at the time in the '60s. I think it came on the air in '66, and uh, it was popular with a niche group. I was one of them. I was a Trekkie from the year ago, but it really cost the studio a great deal to produce the shows, and they actually limited the amount of special effects you could have in any particular show, like the transporter and stuff like that. And so but they do that with a lot of shows. Battlestar Galactica, all those shows, they didn't keep that stuff. I don't know what happened to Robbie the Robot from Forbidden Planet. He was around for a while and then he just sort of disappeared. Do you remember Robbie the Robot?
I do, and I actually, being a Trekkie, real quick going back to Star Trek, what surprised me was, we hear about it disappearing and then coming back on TV for a few more seasons. And I don't think a lot of people know who the driving force of the resurgence of the TV show was because it was a source nobody would ever expect. And that was Lucille Ball, a comedian.
That I did not know.
She was the reason she went to her husband at Desilu and said, "We need to put Star Trek on. People love it. We need it to be airing." And he was like you were saying it's too expensive. She goes, "Then I'll pay for it." And she paid out. I think it came out that she paid for some of the season out of her own pocket. And then Desi Lou was like, "Hey, we're actually making money with this show.
Which
Let's
which series are we talking about here?
the original series."
The original series was on for 3 years and never came back.
It was canceled after the first year from CBS, I think it was. And then Lucille Ball fought, and Desilu brought it back for the next two seasons. I saw it on a Star Trek behind the scenes deal that Lucille Ball was one of the main components of keeping Star Trek on the air as a TV show.
Did you well, I was there at the time, and I have to tell you, I only remember the show being on the one time, and I remember, yeah, it came on in 1966, and it went off in June of '69. Total number of episodes was 79. The original run lasted 2 years and 9 months. That was it. And then the next Star Trek show was Star Trek Generations, and then of course you had Voyager and Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, it's here it says Lucille Ball's connection to Star Trek is significant because her production company, Desilu Productions, produced the original series as she personally championed the project, even financing a second pilot after the first was rejected by NBC.
Oh yeah, she did the original series. Yeah, it was a Disney
Yes.
production. Yeah, but they didn't bring it back on the air. It was on the air for 2 years and 9 months, and then that was it.
Well,
That's
I think they
amazing.
call it bringing it back on because the first pilot failed and everybody was like, nope. And then she said, let's do a new pilot. And it brought it back on the
You're
air.
right. Jeffrey Hunter was in the original. He was the original Captain Kirk in the what was that called? The Menagerie, the
The
original title.
Menagerie, yeah.
Yeah, that was the original. Yeah, good series. Good series. I love Star Wars too. At first, I'm not real crazy about it anymore. It's
No, Disney kind of.
yeah, they kind of did, didn't they?
Yeah. I don't know how they did it. They took a multi-billion, super popular series and made it to
And
where now
totally
everybody's
screwed
like,
it up. Yeah.
we're gonna go watch something else.
The only thing left that I enjoy is The Mandalorian.
I
You know,
agree.
that was about the only thing that I left. And I don't know. They seem like the minute Disney took it over, they started repeating. The fourth episode to me was the same as the very first one. I think it was the fourth episode. The first movie was about the Death Star and the rebels and all that. And the second movie was about a whole planet that became the Death Star and it could put out a sun. But it was the same exact thing. Empire's trying to get to it. The rebels are trying to get to it. And of course, Han Solo died in that one. But I think that was the no, that wasn't the fourth one. I think it was like the how many
Number
movies?
7.
I was
There's
gonna say
9.
7. Yeah, I think it was number 7. Yeah, I was gonna say they did 6 of the original, and they were already beginning to fade. And then the seventh one came out, and I thought it's well done, but I've seen it before. This is not new to me. You know?
Yeah, and I gotta admit, 7 and 8 kind of were like, yeah, we're doing the repeat of the first, 2 trilogies now, so to speak.
And then they
But the
got
ninth
yeah.
movie, kind of, I was like, man, they should have done this one to start because it was like totally opposite. And it was like, man, this opened the door to so many other opportunities of movies coming. And it's like, this is where we should have started the third trilogy.
Probably, yeah. I do think the original trilogy was pretty darn good. I mean, I remember the line snaking around the theaters back in 1977, and I went and saw it 4 times, and I waited in those lines, and it was like a happening, an event. Everyone in this line is talking and laughing and joking and doing all this, and it was all to see Star Wars, the original movie again. It was the first real breakthrough sci-fi movie that I remember outside of maybe Forbidden Planet that actually was well done. It wasn't a cheap B movie, science fiction movie.
Yeah.
As so many of them were. Now, don't get me wrong, there were other movies that were good too, Close Encounters of the Third Kind and stuff. They were all getting very good in the 70s. But through the 50s and 60s, we wallowed in Pie Place for UFOs and Demons from Planet Nine or whatever. I mean, it was all garbage, really. Although, in its
Right.
own way, it had its merit, you know.
Well, and the thing that surprised me too about how Disney screwed up Star Wars is you take like you used to talk about seeing it in the 1970s, the first movie, and when it was re-released as the special edition, the same people came back in, and my generation was able to, because I was born 78, 1 year after, so I
Mm.
got to experience it in the big screen for the first time, sitting
Uh,
next to people who've seen it, and everybody still had that euphoria of, oh my god, seeing this opera epic in
Oh,
space.
it was. It really was. I have to say, I was really looking forward to the Foundation series on television too, and was sorely disappointed in that. It was. I don't know. Did you ever read the Foundation books? Foundation and
Mm,
Empire, Second Foundation, all of those by Isaac Asimov.
like, I read Heir to the Empire and some of those.
Yeah, they came much later. They when they have a good thing, they like to run into the ground apparently. But I I loved the original Foundation series. So when I went to watch it on TV, I don't know what it was on, it's on Paramount or something. I was so disappointed because they had changed it so much that it barely seemed like the same movie, and it was tediously slow. I mean, you did have action every now and then, but you had long periods, like when they're on the spaceship going to the Foundation, the first Foundation. They're in space like for 5 years, and they're swimming in a pool, and everything's dark and kind of gloomy on board spaceships. I don't know why. Star Trek spaceships were bright and cheery, but
Yeah.
lately spaceships have gotten quite dark. But
Even Battlestar Galactica was bright.
yeah, comparatively speaking, yeah. But now everything's and it's also drippy. I've never seen so many wet, drippy interiors of spaceships as I have, and that kind of started with the Alien and also Blade Runner. Remember seeing Blade Runner and thinking, how depressing, this gray, dark movie. Excellent movie, by the way. I mean, that thing really has withstood the test of time, but at the time, to see such a dark vision of the future was unusual. It wasn't the bright, optimistic future of the 60s and early 70s that we
Yeah.
were brought up on at the time,
And another one that we're missing is Dune. That one was like epic that came out, and it was like you had different factions vying for control of one planet, and it was like nobody wanted to give the planet a say for themselves. Everybody was like, we're going to control your world, you're going to work for us.
Well, I mean, why not? The powerful always take advantage of the weak. Actually, The original Dune movie of the '80s, I rather liked. It was the first real attempt to do Dune, and I thought they did a reasonably good job. All the whispering as a form of narration drove me nuts, but other than that, it was pretty good. The remake, uh, who was the young actor that starred in the remake? I can't think of his name offhand.
I can't either, but I think he was in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Was he? Yeah, I didn't think he fit the part very well. He seemed out of.
Yeah,
He was sort
he
of like
played Wonka, I think.
he played who?
Wonka, in charge of the factory, Willy Wonka.
Well, I thought Willy Wonka was played by Johnny Depp.
That was an earlier movie version.
Well, the earlier movie version was starred Gene Wilder as.
Well, Gene Wilder, and then they remade it with Johnny Depp, but then they decided to do the origins of Wonka, and that is the kid from Dune.
Yeah, I saw a sequel to The Wizard of Oz. That was absolutely horrible too. But I don't know why they have to push it to such extremes, but they do. I guess when you're making money off something, you don't want to let go of the franchise. But
No, but they also look at like Marvel, who makes buku dollars off of movie upon movie on the series, but it's different
they haven't for the
story.
last couple of years. They're not doing well at all,
Well, I think because
with a couple exceptions.
yeah,
Yeah.
DC couldn't figure it out, and I think Hollywood right now is undergoing massive restructuring, and so I think that's why a lot of the stuff coming out is like, oh, we'll remake this thing because we really don't have writers writing new stuff because we're reinventing ourselves.
They're not even reinventing it. They're just rewriting the old stuff, and for want of a better term, making it more woke. Which some of it needed to be. We needed to be more inclusive with women and other races like that. Absolutely. The days of an all-white Hollywood should have been long gone by now. But by the same token, in the effort to make it more relevant to people of today and the younger generations, they've also hamstrung and gutted a lot of it. Um, Isaac Asimov was an astrophysicist and a great sci-fi writer. He did the whole iRobot series, the three laws of robotics in Star Trek. They talk about Data's positronic brain right out of iRobot. The Bicentennial Man was a movie based on the iRobot series. He was terrific, but in redoing the movies, they wanted to make it more current and relevant to people, and in the process, I think they kind of gutted. Yes, he was in the golden age of science fiction. Yes, it was always men in space opera, and the woman had to be saved. That should have gone long ago, and it did. But finally, but by the same token, if you go too far in that direction, you're obviating the very crowd that's attracted to these movies. And you know what crowd is most attracted to Star Wars and space opera type movies. I'm sure you know which
Oh,
crowd would be the young male adult. And if you take away the young male adult, then you have to rely on the female population to do it. And a lot of there are exceptions, of course, and a lot of exceptions, but a lot of women just aren't that into space opera. They'd rather watch a good romance or mystery or something like that. So Disney kind of killed the very audience that was supporting its movies, and now it's trying to win them back. We seem to go way in one direction with this balance thing, down and up, down and up. And now I think we're trying to hit the middle and becoming more reasonable about everything.
yeah.
You know, I've, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, which is what I think drew me to Battlestar Galactica, because if you remember, you had females operating command on the bridge, like you
Mm-hmm.
could not launch without the female telling you you are good to go or where
Yep.
your target was, and they had female fighter pilots.
Yep. And in Star Trek, you had Nichelle Nichols as Lieutenant Uhura, and she played a very good role. And you had
Mhm.
others, but again, they weren't quite on the same level as the male roles. It was they were the ones always having to be
Yeah.
saved by the men, you know.
Well,
And
and not to toot Battlestar Galactica too much, but they also had the first female doctor. Because remember, occasionally there would be the male doctor who would come in and talk, but he would always ask Cassiopeia her thoughts, and she would say, "Yeah, I agree." And it was more like she was the chief medical officer than
Officer,
he
yeah.
was.
Yeah, no, the one thing I liked about Marvel is it did bring women to the forefront and made superheroes of a number of them. But by the same token, it almost went too far, and it had one movie, it was all women superheroes, and they just lost the young male adult crowd. Unfortunately, the young male adult crowd likes what it likes, just like women like what they like. And they want to see men duking it out. They don't want to see women humiliating the male figure. And any more than women want to see the male humiliating the woman figure. I mean, with what they did with Marvel is akin to what we did with women in the 1950s. Their place was in the home. They were supposed to do the ironing and the housekeeping and being very happy doing it. I don't know anybody who was, but and by the same token, then that's what they did in reverse later. I remember watching Thor Thunder something, and they stripped him nude in front of all the gods in this big pantheon. He was standing there
Yeah,
naked. It was never, never would they have done that to a female lead in those
no,
movies. No, because that would have been sexually objectifying the woman. But it was okay to sexually objectify the man. The pendulum had swung to the point where now it was the man's turn to be treated in a humiliating fashion. But I think now we're finally getting to a balance where it's fairly even on both sides, and that's what I like to see: balance, fairness.
yeah. And I'm looking at the time, and we actually are like close to an hour and 40 minutes. So
Yeah, we are.
it's kind of gotten a little bit away from me, but I want to give you a chance real quick before we go. Where can people find all 82 or your books, if not all of them?
I want him to buy all of them, several copies each. I have my Rolls Royce to maintain. No, they can get me at Amazon, or the easiest way is just Google me. Just Google Rob Shelsky, it comes up. I'm with Permuted Press. I'm with Simon and Schuster. I was with Class Act Books, Red Rose Publishing, a whole bunch of different places. So the easiest place to find me is on Amazon, or again, just Google me. It comes up.
Very cool. And before we sign out, is there anything like any message or anything that you want to give the viewers?
Yeah, a short one. If you're alone at night and you see a UFO coming in your direction, by all means, film it if you can. We need all the data evidence we can get to support it. But if it looks like it's coming right at you, like it's signaling you out for any reason whatsoever, if you have any feeling that it's starting to zero in on you, run like hell. Run like hell.
Yeah, I don't think we need any more of the generation of there's an asteroid coming to hit us. Let's film it until the very last second.
And who are they filming it for, I wonder? I mean, if everyone's going to
Yeah,
get killed by this, right? So, yeah. Well, no, I mean, we need the information, but by the same token, people have to consider their safety. And if we can be abducted at random, anytime, any place, anywhere, including our children, maybe walking to the local 7-Eleven at night, a block from the home or something, that's scary. And we should take it as being scary. Whether or not it ultimately proves to be scary or not, I don't know, but err on the side of caution. That's all I'm saying.
I agree. And with that, I'm going to say good night to everyone in the chat room and everyone who's watching. Thank you for participating. And thank you, Rob, for coming on. I greatly appreciate it. And my heart and my show to you. Thank you for what you're doing for humanity.
And thank you, sir, for spreading the word. Thank you very much. We need people like you.
Yes, and hopefully we'll get you back on and we can talk some more about all the different genres and where what's going on in the world.
Didn't we just do that?
I know, totally unscripted, and hey, it worked.
It worked well. And again, I thank you for letting me on the show. That was nice of you.
Well, you're welcome anytime.
Well, you have a good night, sir.
Thank you. You too.
I'll try.
And good night, everyone.
And good night to you, sir.